Hello, everyone. Welcome to NFL Inside the Lab. I am Brian. I'm here with Ian and Matthew Freeman. As always, we are here to talk about some of the injury news that we just received. We'll talk about how it affects some projection changes, maybe some ownership projections as well. And then we'll take some user questions here at the end. Thank you guys for joining us. Merry Christmas Eve. Interesting slate coming up. Let's dive right in. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to hit on all of the injury stuff for today. Ian, let's start with the Patriots running backs. We did get some injury news this morning. You mind going over that and then what it means for this backfield against the Bills this week?
Yeah, so we already knew Rex Burkhead was going to be out early in the week, but the surprising news is obviously James White is out with that ankle injury he sustained. So Patriots are just going to be rolling with Mike Gillislee and Dion Lewis. Brandon Bolden will also be active, but he's really more of just a special teams guy. So we're basically expecting Dion Lewis to kind of be that lead back. It's tough to say just how big of a role Gillislee is going to have. The report from Schefter is that he figures prominently into the game plan. So that's kind of use your best judgment there. But he hasn't played since week 8. At the same time, we've only seen Dion Lewis get over 15 carries in 2 of his 52 career games. So might not be a guy that Patriots necessarily want to pound into the line 20 plus times. But, with their situation back there, they might just have to.
Yeah, really interesting. Freeman, we talked about the situation a little bit on the flex. We didn't know that James White was going to be out. But, some interesting notes. Rex Burkhead was really the guy that they were using in the red zone. So I'm curious your thoughts on, do you think Lewis is still going to get some red zone looks, or are they promote Gillislee, after he had been non-active for a while. Do you think that he's, they're promoting him for that role, or do you think Lewis has some viable red zone upside here as well?
I think Lewis has some red zone upside, but I think Gillislee is probably going to be the guy in the red zone. But Gillislee, he's not a pass catcher. I think Lewis is really going to be taking that James White role of being a guy, because he does have that potential as a pass catcher. We've seen him do that previously. So I think he's going to be much more valuable, and I think he will still get some red zone work. So I think of the two, he's the one who's much more intriguing, but Gillislee's obviously cheaper. So I don't know. I think, as Ian said, use your best judgment there and just expect to get screwed no matter what you do.
Does it make Rob Gronkowski or Danny Amendola, James White was a short target, middle of the field outlet for Brady? Does it make, now that he's out, Burkhead's out, a lot of these guys are out, does it make either of those two guys more intriguing for you?
Maybe a little bit, but not significantly, because it's not as if White is a guy who dependably gets a lot of targets each game. His target share is fairly inconsistent. And so you can maybe give an extra target to Gronk, an extra target to Amendola, but it's not a huge bump.
Fair enough. Let's keep on moving here. Let's go to the Washington Redskins. Maybe a little bit surprising here that we got word that Samaje Perine is a game-time decision. Ian, what would happen if he's not able to go? Just all the Capri Bibbs?
So it's looking like Perine will actually be able to go. Okay. But yeah, man, we still saw Bibbs last week, really in his first action with the Redskins. He was able to kind of take over that pass down role. It seemed like for a second, Perine would kind of become their 3-down back after Byron Marshall was put on IR. But the Redskins seem pretty willing to keep using Bibbs there on third downs. Obviously, revenge game setting for Bibbs. Could have had a lot more touches, obviously, if Perine was out. But at the same time, I think we knew going in this game it was going to be tough for Perine to really get going against the Broncos' number 2 run D in DVOA. So perhaps with Perine being active, Bibbs will still get his workload with lower ownership. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, it's interesting. Freeman, Capri Bibbs getting a lot of buzz here. We know that Pete loves him as his fellow CSU type of guy, but it is interesting that Capri Bibbs, his ownership's now up, projected ownership now up to 13 to 16%. In an interesting matchup for a guy who has 6 opportunities in the NFL.
Well, I think the ownership was projecting based on the assumption of Perine being out. Mm-hmm. So with him being in, I could see that being adjusted down a little bit, but it's not a great spot for either of these guys. If Pirine were out, then that would be fantastic for Bibbs because he really would be the only guy there, and he does have pass catching capacity. So that's the thing that you really do have to like about him. But against the Broncos defense, which is very good this year against the running game, it's not a good spot.
Yeah. Let's keep on moving here. Let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Ian, we had Michael Thomas pop up on the injury report. It does look like he's going to play, but is there any concern about his, ability to be effective here?
I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, whenever a guy pops on the injury report on Saturday with a hamstring injury, I mean, I think everyone should be concerned. But at the same time, he did go out, warm-ups, did his thing, and we haven't gotten any reports that he'll be limited at all. But I mean, at the same time, it's tough to kind of think that he's going to be 100% if he just had this injury yesterday. We have seen Micah just ball out against the Falcons. I mean, he's had over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in his only 3 career meetings against them. So definitely a matchup, he's been capable of taking advantage of in the past. But I mean, I got to think at least, I'm curious to hear what Friedman thinks. I think for cash games, I mean, it's a pretty tough call when you're dealing with an injury like that.
Yeah, hamstring, for a speedy receiver, it seems a little bit concerning. But Freeman, I mean, Ian's right. Over 30 DraftKings points just 2 weeks ago against the Falcons, and now he's at the Superdome. So I guess the question is 13 to 60% ownership. We'll factor that into our analysis here. What are you doing with Thomas today?
I think it's really hard to trust him with that. I mean, injuries that pop up on the report in the second half of the week, that's really bad. So I don't think he's cash viable because of that. I think you can't trust him, which is really unfortunate because I think at one point he was like number 1, maybe in some of the sharp fantasy pros for wide receiver rankings earlier in the week, top 3 at least. And now he's gotten bumped down a little bit just because people are unsure, but it is a really nice matchup. So I think if you still want to try to hedge, you maybe can still go a little overweight on him in GPPs if you think people will be underweight, and especially if you kind of want to try to mitigate not having him in your cash game lineups.
Fair. Let's keep on moving here. Let's go to the Dallas Cowboys. Really interesting spot here. We have Zeke at home. He's back. Was a little bit of concern that his big offensive lineman Tyron Smith was going to be out, but Ian, it looks like he is going to be in, and he's going to have his offensive line attack in his debut again. What are your thoughts on this offensive line and Zeke in this spot?
Yeah, we haven't got – it's a 4:30 game, so we'll get official confirmation later. But Tyron has said that he believes he'll go out there and play. So definitely great news. I think it's kind of an upgrade for Zeke's passing game role. I mean, Michael Bennett on the Seahawks D-line, they're definitely capable of getting some pressure. So if they didn't have Smith, I think Zeke might have to stay in there and help out with Byron Bell a little bit. But, with Smith there, Dak's blind side should be good. The reports all week. I mean, Linehan and the Cowboys are literally saying like how much they're going to feed Zeke. So, I mean, I think it's a situation where even if you think, the Seahawks are going to play a bit better than they did last week, I mean, Zeke's getting those 20 touches and he's going to get fed. And if, he has their best offensive lineman in front of him, that's obviously good for everyone involved.
All right, Freeman, your Cowboys, we talked about him on the flex, but that was Tuesday night. And, there were some legit questions about Tyron Smith in the offensive line. But now that we know that he is likely to play, what are your thoughts on Zeke in this, what we call a smash spot?
Well, I still think actually the key for this is what's happening on defense for the Seahawks. And earlier in the week, there were questions about whether Bobby Wagner would be able to play and whether KJ Wright would be able to play. Like those are 2 really important guys at linebacker for the Seahawks. And Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like both of those guys are expected to be active for this game. KJ Wright coming back from a concussion, like that's serious, but once you're out of the protocol, it seems like you're basically good to go. I think he will actually be healthier for this game than Bobby Wagner, who's still dealing with those hamstring issues, and those don't go away so quickly. So I think it's still an issue where the defense for the Seahawks is weaker than they have been historically, but still not as strong as you want them to be with Wagner injured. So a better spot still for Zeke. So I'm fine if people want to use him for cash games. Just the Cowboys have crushed this season with Zeke in the lineup. Smaller sample size, but I think it's still pretty relevant against a defense that's injured.
Yeah, and being at home as a favorite is always a good thing for Zeke as well. Let's keep on moving here. Let's go to the Chargers situation here at running back. We got some word on Austin Eckler that even with his broken hand, he's going to be on special teams. But what are we expecting from a workload perspective from Melvin Gordon here today, Ian?
Yeah, Eckler will be active, but like you said, special teams only role. So we've seen Brandon Oliver before. It's not like he's just incapable of catching passes or anything. But this season, we have seen Melvin's workload really boom when the situation behind him isn't so cut and dry. And I mean, even in the last 6 weeks, we've seen his workload boom just with Eckler healthy. I mean, Gordon has more touches than everyone except Le'Veon Bell over the last 6 weeks. And he's with his pass game role secure. I mean, it's all you could ask for. Also, he's facing this Jets defense. Once again, Muhammad Wilkerson is out due to just Todd Bowles deciding he doesn't want to play one of his best defensive linemen. So, opportunity. Obviously, it's a road game and everything, but opportunity for Gordon to go in there, have some extra targets, and maybe have some more success on the ground.
Yeah, Freeman, so you're always a little bearish on Melvin Gordon, but it seems like the times that you are slightly bullish is when he's a heavy favorite. So what are your thoughts on him this week?
I like him this week. Oliver, he was bad enough to get jumped over by an undrafted rookie. And I think Eckler actually is pretty decent, but Oliver, although he does have some experience, like there's nothing really special about his capability. So I think Gordon is going to get a lot of the work. They are favored. I prefer Gordon when he's a favorite at home as opposed to on the road. But still Gordon as a favorite, much better than when he's an underdog. So it's a pretty good spot for him. And again, going against a defense that is missing one of its better players.
Two more situations we'll hit on quickly. Ian, we got word that Devin Funchess is going to be in. Obviously, just incredible matchup for the Panthers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are one of the worst pass defenses in the league. We saw Funchess' target go down a little bit last week. Greg Olsen was the target share leader. What are you expecting, moving forward for this Panthers offense?
Yeah, you said it, man. Great matchup. And Russell Shepard, their number 3 receiver, is out. So we can expect maybe an extra target or two to go to, Funchess, Bird, and Clay. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, Funchess has terrible splits with Olsen active, but I think a lot of that is more just games where Kelvin Benjamin was still on the team. Since Benjamin got traded, I mean, other than a down week or two, we've seen Funchess play great. He's averaged 4 catches, 70 yards, 0.7 touchdowns in those 6 games. So I think in this matchup, I mean, also just taking away, just looking at the actual matchup for a second, I mean, if he's going to see a bunch of, Smith and Brent Grimes, I mean, that's a serious physical advantage for Funchess. He's literally got 50 pounds and 6 inches on Brent Grimes, especially. So I think, at home, that's a matchup we can win. And if we get some lower ownership because, Funchess didn't play so well last week in a smash spot, all the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Freeman. So we talk about a lot about recency bias at Labs. So last week, Funchess was the chalk. He burned people with his 1 reception. Greg Olsen comes back and dominates. Is this the week to actually be on Funchess and take advantage of the recency bias?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I understand if people have some hesitation about like cash game or whatever, but I think it's actually still fine. He does have a really nice matchup. The Buccaneers are, I believe, second to last in pass DVOA on defense, or like a bottom 3. Like they're not good against the pass. So Funchess, even if you are counting last game in the aggregate, he's still gotten substantial work in the wake of the Kelvin Benjamin trade. I mean, as Ian mentioned, big body has a really substantial matchup advantage going against the smaller cornerbacks. So I mean, I think if you are bullish on Cam Newton, and a lot of people are for this week, it would make sense also to be bullish on Funchess.
Yep. Agreed. All right, let's move to last one here. Sorry, I'm not sure why. There it is. Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. This will be the last injury situation we hit on. Speaking of good matchups, a really good one against this 49ers defense. We have some injury news on the wideout situation for the Jaguars. In what's going on there, and just how much D.D. Westbrook do you want?
Yeah, man. I mean, Allen Hurns has been out the last few weeks. He actually returned to practice, but he'll once again be sidelined with an ankle injury. The new one's Marquise Lee, who's out, and he's, probably not even going to be back to the playoffs. So Now we're trotting out D.D. Westbrook, Keelan Cole, and Jaden Mickens in their 3 wide receiver sets. I think a lot of what we just said about Funches is also true for Westbrook. Smash spot last week. He's had at least 6 targets in every game he suited up this season, except for last week when he only got 2. So this is a guy that was a pretty substantial part of the offense, prior to last week. Now he's got this smash spot against the Niners. We've seen Blake Bortles, and he's apparently like the best quarterback in the league now, or so everyone thinks. And so I don't know, man. If we can, like I said, if we can get lower, Westbrook, won the Blankenkoff Award last year, preseason superstar. We've seen him ball out. We know he has the talent ability. So if he's going to get a few more targets now, I think he has the chance to be that true wide receiver 1 in this offense with Marquise Lee out.
Yeah, Freeman, do you want all the DD today?
Yes. Crush.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, fair. All right. Last thing we'll hit on before we get to some questions and get out of here. We had talked about just off air, any potential weather situations. Do either of you guys have any read on whether it's going to impact any of these games? It doesn't seem like there's a lot there.
Yeah, the one that came up, there's going to be some snow in the Chicago-Cleveland game. So, it's not going to make anything easier for Mitch Trubisky and Deshaun Kaiser to get their passing attacks going. At the same time, it is only 1 to 3 inches, and it's pretty low wind. So I don't think it's a situation like we saw in Buffalo a few weeks ago where teams are going to be literally incapable of passing the ball, but, still something to keep an eye on. Other than that, I believe we're pretty good.
Yeah. I didn't need much more incentive to go on the under anyway for this game.
Right.
So yeah.
There wasn't going to be much passing in that game in the first place, right?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to some user questions. Pulling up the chat here right now. Go ahead and throw your questions in if you have any. We'll probably spend 5 to 10 minutes here before we get out of here. Let's get to some all right. Let's see here. Any people are wondering about Julio Jones. Freeman, what are your thoughts on Julio in this matchup, Superdome?
Yeah, not a great spot. The question with Julio always is whether he's going to get his targets and whether some of those are going to come near the end zone. Not a great spot with Marshawn Lattimore. I don't know if we know exactly how the coverage is going to break down on whether it's Lattimore actually shadowing or whether they split coverage a little bit with King Crawley. But Julio Jones is capable of winning routinely against basically any corner he faces. It's just a question whether he gets the targets. I don't have him, I think, in the top 3 in rankings. I think I maybe have him at number 4. But Ian might have some thoughts on the shadowing specifically with Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, so Lattimore hasn't shadowed all season, but Julio is one of those top receivers that he has gone out of his way to shadow. He didn't do it every snap last time they played because he was still coming off an injury, but we are expecting Lattimore to mostly be on Julio's hip. One pretty big note, literally tweeted a minute ago from Tom Pelissero, but apparently Jones was wincing and kept grabbing at his taped up left thumb before cutting his early warm-up short. He came back out. Looks like he's playing, but he was banged up this week with an ankle and thumb injury. So, tough matchup and potentially limited Julio. We'll see if he can overcome it.
Yeah, 17-20% ownership might be wise to go under, I think, in GPPs there. All right, let's go to a couple other questions here. Freeman, in a lot of our content this week, we've talked about how, people are really interested in Zeke, but, an interesting storyline is that the offense has been better as a whole with Zeke, and potentially you could get some ownership advantage, maybe a leverage situation here by, you don't have to fade Zeke, but also maybe getting Dak Prescott and Des Bryant in a revamped offense. What are your thoughts on the passing game of the Cowboys against the Seahawks today?
Yeah, I like that. I think that probably is the way to play it, at least in certain lineups. If you want to go away from Zeke, because I think there will be probably inflated ownership on him, just because people will want to have the option of having him in their lineup, especially because no Le'Veon Bell is an option for this slate. So yeah, that's definitely a way to gain leverage. You're going against the Seahawks team that's allowed, I think, 72 points over the last 2 games. They are not clearly like themselves. And then the splits that Dak has with Zeke, they're pretty significant. And the guy he wants to go to is Dez Bryant, who now has the opportunity to go against a Sherman-less defense. There's not, I think, the cornerback on this team now who really matches up well with Dez. So I think it's a better situation for him. So yeah, I like going with both of those guys and stacking.
Mm-hmm. And you write every week about how Dez is one of the most cornerback sensitive wide receivers. So with the Seahawks banged up a little bit, it seems like a pretty decent spot to target him at only 2 and 4% ownership.
Yeah, shout out to PFF Scott Barrett for that cornerback sensitive info. But yeah, man, I mean, I was looking at it this week, and even going back to, the earlier Dez years when DeMarco was on the team, like he always played better with DeMarco in the lineup. And I think these are some splits that make sense. I mean, nowadays he's not the same guy that used to go for 150 and really stretch the defense, but he's still that red zone beast that gets plenty of chances down there. So when you add the engine of the offense back in and they can kind of get more red zone opportunities and get moving, it makes more sense that, one of the league's best touchdown scorers can score more touchdowns. So definitely a situation. And also we kind of talked about on the flex how, with Zeke's receiving workload has been up and down a little bit this year, but it's a kind of a unique situation where he and Dak are a little more correlated than the average running back and quarterback, just with Zeke's at times high receiving workload and Dak's rushing workload.
Yep. Let's keep on moving. Just a couple more questions here. Seems a popular question that people are having to answer this week. Freeman, you always talk in your tight end. The first question every week is you have to figure out whether you wish to Gronk or not. And it's made a little more complicated by Travis Kelce, who is in a very, very, very nice spot against the Dolphins. Sort of compare, contrast Gronk and Kelce this week.
Okay, so you have this interesting narrative of Gronk historically doing really well against Buffalo, and like he's from Buffalo. But then you also have like the competing narrative of like maybe the Bills will be wanting a little bit of revenge from the cheap shot on Tre'Davious White. So I don't know what the Bills are going to be doing to try to neutralize Gronk if they're going to do anything different than they did last game. But they have even though Gronk did what he wanted to do with them, they do have a good pass defense. Like they have 2 of the 3 best coverage safeties according to PFF. So that's interesting. But Kelce is basically Gronk-esque, and he has such a great matchup, and he's cheaper. So for all of those reasons, I would go with Kelce over Gronk. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think you ever want to fade Gronk entirely in GPPs. So, but Kelce is the guy I much prefer out of those 2. So if you're going with one of those in cash, if you want to pay up for a tight end in cash, I prefer Kelce to Gronk.
Yeah, Ian, any thoughts on that tight end situation? We also have Antonio Gates, who's probably going to be a popular punt option. What are your thoughts on the tight end situation for Week 16?
Yeah, I agree with what Freeman was saying about Kelce and Gronk. We'll add with Kelce, it's interesting that Kareem Hunt's his only teammate he's had a negative correlation with this season. So something to keep in mind if you're stacking the Chiefs. One other guy I think we need to pay attention to is Cam Brate over in Tampa. O.J. Howard's done for the season. We saw Jameis really kind of feed Brate more this season, even when Howard was healthy. So if we have Deshaun Jackson out, maybe there's a chance that Brate could kind of get going. It's obviously not a great spot on the road against this Panthers defense, but I was kind of surprised that Brate's ownership hasn't gotten higher. And I think if it's between, him and Antonio Gates, who we just don't even know if he can even run anymore or separate, I think Brate offers a lot more upside.
Yeah, it's very well. I guess we'll finish with this one here. Interesting that a lot of these Tampa Bay wide receivers are getting so much love, especially even in cash games against this Panthers defense. It's not like they're implied to score a whole lot of points. I get it. It's the price tag. Godwin's $3K and then price, and then Evans is as cheap as he's, I think, ever been. But Freeman, what are your thoughts on these pass catchers for Tampa Bay?
I like Evans. I like the spot. Godwin, I think it's hard to trust him because he's a rookie and he really hasn't had much action before. But he is a high upside guy if you just look at his physical profile and his production from college, and like a young guy. And sometimes it takes the younger guys a little bit of time to develop. I mean, you've seen that with Funchess on the other side of the ball. But Godwin is interesting. So if you, for some reason, are bullish on this offense and you kind of want to get away from Evans a little bit, Godwin might be a guy to consider. But Evans, I still like in this spot.
Okay, I think we're going to end it there. Thank you guys for hopping on and joining us as always. We'll be back next week. It'll be our last one, week 17. So it'll be great. But definitely thanks for hanging out on Christmas Eve. Wish you guys all the best in tournaments today and tomorrow, and a very Merry Christmas.